Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Built in Ohio, the Ohio X podcast, where we're talking with and about the people, companies, and ideas building out Ohio's tech hub. So today we have a very fascinating and great guest who comes from a great organization. So Anthony Gillespie from Parallax Advanced Research. Anthony, welcome and thanks so much for being on the show.
Yeah, thank you, Chris, and I want to thank Ohio X for highlighting Ohio's innovation stories here. Pleasure to be here.
Well, there's certainly a lot. There's a ton of stuff happening. You all with Parallax are a perfect example of that. An organization headquartered in the Dayton area, but of course you're in the Cleveland area, correct? Is that right?
Yes, that is correct. Correct here. Parallax is really, our Parallax and OAI have a relationship here. Parallax is really the parent organization here in the Ohio Aerospace Institute, which is up in Cleveland, is the affiliate of Parallax. And as you mentioned, we have offices in Dayton, where Parallax is located as far as the headquarters, and then in Cleveland for OAI. The both nonprofit research institutes that really focus in on research and development. They look at as far as tech transfer and tech partnerships is the second area. And then the last part is really looking at workforce development with a focus towards STEM areas. And so those are our three areas of focus that we have. And really, we're looking to advance those activities throughout Ohio as well as the nation. And, in my role here, I get involved as far as the director of strategic and technology based partnerships in the tech transfer office, really looking at how do you apply technology for economic and societal impact.
That's great. Well, and thank you for that overview of both Parallax and OAI. Talk a little bit about the technology transfer. With such a strong focus and deep expertise in the DoD Department of Defense type space. Of course, Parallax being headquartered in the Dayton area, which is home to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, and it's a hugely important institution, not just in Ohio, but for America. And then in the Cleveland area, you have things like NASA Glenn and their research center for NASA and space exploration. And so if you could kind of just talk a little bit about, the Parallax OAI with Wright-Pat, NASA, and just kind of that DoD type relationship that, you all kind of work at this intersection of.
Yeah, and for us, it's about really helping our really you mentioned as far as right Pat down in Dayton, and then NASA Glenn, which is up in the Cleveland area. But for us, our role is really being that technology translator and helping them take a lot of the research that's happening at those respective government funded centers, helping them take that to market. Our public dollars, as far as federal government dollars, are being used to create research. And we work as far as helping them translate those ideas into uh, products and services that can be of value to the public. And so that's really what is involved with us. And we're working with partners in the ecosystem to execute. It's just not Parallax, but we're working with industry, university, and then the government really kind of in this case providing the ideas to create products and services that are of value to the public.
Absolutely. And you come from this space, and so you've been doing this work, well before you joined the Parallax team. You've been at Carnegie Mellon, you've been at Patel, doing work with organizations where really this is this is your background, and so you have seen it from that the industry side, you've seen it from the research side, you've seen it from higher education. Just if you could talk about why technology transfer, why it matters, why it's such a big deal. And I think of something like Carnegie Mellon, for instance, and the work that that university has done through their AI in particular. That's one where they have been able to really attract an incredible amount of technology companies. Google testing Waymo and self-driving cars, and all sorts of AI engineers. Robotics being a huge thing in Pittsburgh, but really how technology transfer can be the catalyst for some of this work, and can really put ecosystems, Cleveland, Dayton, et cetera, on the map, just as we have seen play out in other places. Again, Carnegie Mellon being a perfect example.
Yeah, and it starts off with really looking at, you have major research institutions in our federal labs, federal government labs like Wright Pat, NASA Glenn, others, when you look throughout the nation, for example, Oak Ridge National Lab down in Tennessee, all those are players that provide a basis of good ideas. Tech transfer is really looking at that area of how do you take those ideas and then and really move it to and translate it into practical use.
Mhm.
And, a research idea a lot of times is kind of, they're testing and seeing if they can take a concept and make it real and does it work. And then the transferring is occurring where you take that research and someone else actually starts to leverage that
Mm.
idea and then move it to a final point here. And we call that, as far as really a commercialization process, where it's being used to meet a need, provide a solution to a problem, etc. That's how it works. So tech transfer is really important because it's taking a lot of the ideas that are created in the lab and then getting it to a point where it can be used into a product or service to benefit us. There's many examples of that, but
Mhm.
uh, that's how it works. And I know we're going to get into that a little bit more as far as uh, you know carrying on as far as throughout our discussion here.
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
but that's how we work.
Yeah, well, that's fantastic. And, I think another strong component, this again, you all do this each and every day, but don't want necessarily people to think, sometimes tech transfer and they think of the researchers at leading universities and institutions. They think of the big companies or big organizations like the Department of Defense. But there's real incredible, tie-ins and opportunities for entrepreneurs and small businesses. So you kind of maybe close the loop on kind of the tech transfer world and opportunity. Touching a bit on that entrepreneurial side and the small business component, the startup component, and how often sometimes those early stage entrepreneurs are the ones going in and grabbing the technology and building these companies through startups or new ventures. So just kind of if you wouldn't mind talking about that side of it, the small businesses, the entrepreneurial opportunities.
Yeah, and there's many opportunities available for small business entrepreneurs to interact. One, it could be going to a federal lab or academic institution and reaching out to them and saying, "I have an interest in a particular area." Those institutions really have the ideas there
Hmm.
that are available for a small business entrepreneur to actually get access to.
Yeah.
And the mechanism to do that is a license. And a license is really a way of fostering tech transfer. Another pathway that a small business and entrepreneur could work with the labs is you already have an idea, you have a concept that you're working on. Maybe you have an early stage model. And then you could partner with them from that standpoint of those labs typically have specialized facilities to do testing. They have folks who are specialized in a particular area. And so taking advantage of the know how and then the infrastructure that they have as far as the testing facilities could be another pathway. And then the last area that I'm mentioning, we do a lot of work. We have programs there that support small businesses and entrepreneurs. Is there's federal funding available to support tech transfer and then actually taking those ideas and making them into products and services. Is called the Small Business Innovation Research Program.
Hmm.
It's over $4 billion available for small businesses to take advantage and really take an idea to meet the government needs at a Department of Defense lab like Wright Pat or maybe NASA Glenn and others. And so there's 11 agencies involved as well.
Oh, wow. Well, a fantastic overview. So thank you for that, Anthony.
Yeah.
I'd love to dig a little more into some of the work that you're doing in the Cleveland area, the Precision Urban Agriculture Initiative, excuse me. Can you talk a little bit about that and give us a bit of a background? And then I'd love to kind of go deeper because I think it's a really fascinating, kind of, you have your work, you have some elected officials, you have, kind of really doing some interesting stuff. So can you share a little bit about that?
Yeah, the Precision Urban Agriculture effort is really an effort, pilot program that we have funded through some government resources. And so OAI is working on this program. It's managed by Parallax, our parent organization. And it really applies to looking at how do we take aerospace derived technologies such as drones, AI, sensing, mapping, to help really increase and bring value to urban food production.
Hmm. And how did that come about? Because maybe Department of Defense type organizations, the Ohio Aerospace Institute,
Mm.
agriculture. You don't necessarily kind of put those together when you first maybe think about each of those. But how did that come to be?
Yeah, it came about. Our effort was strongly supported through Congresswoman Chantel Brown's office. She is involved as far as one of the committees as far as looking at agriculture. And so through her efforts and her work as far as on the agricultural committee, we saw that, we work in an area as far as aerospace, really looking at the unmanned aerial systems and other technologies that are being developed. We're seeing a trend as far as potential opportunities to merge some of the work, technology development that's happening in aerospace and aerospace related technologies with ag
Hmm.
to help create value in an industry that doesn't always necessarily look at technology as a value add. And so that's how we've gotten involved, is really kind of sitting there and being that bridge between the two sides.
Yeah, and that's great because we look at Ohio and kind of the tech opportunity. Certainly, really anchored in the Dayton and Cleveland areas, DoD, and what we're talking about, NASA Glenn, so space and aerospace. Of course, people think of insurtech or fintech because of the financial services industries we have here. Healthcare, of course, we have these great innovation districts now, and a ton of leading research at our hospital and research organizations in the healthcare space. But agriculture, that is one where that is such a driver of the Ohio economy. It employs a ton of people. We literally put food on people's tables, not just in Ohio, but well beyond with what our farmers and the agriculture industry does here. But I don't think we talk enough about ag tech because I don't know if it's because people think it's just a farming opportunity, or most of tech is kind of clustered in big urban areas. The three C's, for instance. But maybe talk about kind of some of the early connectivity that you have seen between some of the aerospace type research that you're doing, the urban agriculture initiative, what that looks like from an application standpoint. I'd love to hear a little bit more on that.
Yeah, and just to kind of follow up, Chris, to your point, you think about it, Ohio really is a ag state.
Hmm.
Agriculture is a major sector in the state. Sure, we talk a lot about the biosciences and kind of IT with respect to AI, artificial intelligence, and machine learning, and even manufacturing. But we have a tradition as far as in agriculture. And so there's a lot of jobs in the state. It's still one of the major sectors that we have existing businesses in the state. Switching gears as far as really kind of that bridge between agriculture and then just really the work that we do as far as in aerospace, you're seeing activities and opportunities along those lines. We're talking to a number of companies who are really kind of in more of the unmanned aerial systems space, and they're looking at how can they apply. When I speak of unmanned aerial systems, I'm talking about drones, for example. One potential case study is really how can drones help farmers really look at areas to potentially plant crops,
Hmm.
or look at things as far as potentially invasive species and how that can really help them be more productive as far as from really a crop yield standpoint.
Mhm.
So those are a couple of areas that we're looking at and seeing as far as emerging case studies here.
Hmm.
On the flip side, I mentioned as far as IT, there's IT opportunities as far as AI and machine learning, just from the information and the data that it can be produced as far as in agriculture that probably hasn't been looked at
Hmm.
traditionally.
Yeah.
So
And
there's opportunities there.
yeah, and could you share a little bit on the workforce development side? Because that was an area that you mentioned for both Parallax and OAI. A strong focus in and building out some of that. And so, in this initiative in particular, what are some of the workforce development opportunities that you're seeing?
Yeah, there's a lot of opportunities there. I would say, really, right now, with respect to kind of merging of the areas, is really on one. I would say, kind of more on the supply side, as far as the technology developers. There are opportunities for applications that are more ag related. Another area I didn't mention earlier is kind of more water
Hmm.
and the supply of water. We don't see the problem as much in the Midwest, but when you look national from a national perspective, especially out west, water scarcity is a challenge.
Hmm.
And we have some challenges here in certain selective areas in Ohio. And so those are all areas from a technology development standpoint, we see growth and opportunities. But on the flip side, it comes from as far as workforce development is looking at really saving jobs, retaining jobs, and then growing as far as for farmers. So if they can be more productive, they can grow their workforce from some of the technology solutions that we're putting into place. And
Hmm.
so that's what we're trying to do is be proactive in bringing kind of two sides that may not necessarily always get together to help them from their both respective efforts be successful and meet their needs and grow the workforce and retain the workforce as well.
Absolutely, and I'm glad you mentioned the fresh water, because that obviously can have an incredibly strong and direct tie-in with agriculture, and of course you need fresh water to grow crops and produce and other things and kind of the ag space. But we talk about natural resources that Ohio, for instance, is blessed to have, and one of which is fresh water access, with where we are on Lake Erie, one of the five Great Lakes. And I think that's another piece to your point on ag being such a large driver of our economy that often at least in my opinion, gets overlooked when we think about tech opportunities, because, people are, and rightfully so, building in things like healthcare or manufacturing and other things in that space. But, agriculture is huge. But then, just as you mentioned, out west, states are drying up and reservoirs are drying up, and freshwater scarcity is becoming, unfortunately, more and more of a thing. But we are positioned right on a very, very large, one of the largest freshwater bodies in the world. And so you talk about what an incredible opportunity in this space, and with what you're doing in tech transfer and research at Ohio, universities and research organizations. But fresh water is such a huge opportunity that I wish more people were paying attention to and talking about, and even frankly, I need to learn more on. And so I'm glad you mentioned that. And could you perhaps share a little bit more on that side of things, and what that may look like, from an opportunity capture side, or just where you're seeing it from your work, within the urban agriculture initiative?
Yeah, one big area is, as you mentioned, water scarcity
Mhm.
for certain regions within the state. I mean, we have a big body of water here in Northeast Ohio as far as Lake Erie. And so one is taking advantage of that water supply that we have. Um, one of the lessons learned that we have from, the whole Intel uh, win that we have in the central part of the state, it was about infrastructure. And one of the major pieces why we won that bid had to do with we had an adequate water supply in that region of the state. It was more from the rivers that are in that area, but that was a key.
Mhm.
And so for us, as far as really looking at this effort, we've talked to a number of farmers. For them, it's not necessarily, major water scarcity, but getting water to areas that they need it. And then secondly, making sure they are really looking at it from a sustainability standpoint. How can they efficiently use what we have from a water supply standpoint?
Hmm.
And so a lot of the efforts that we're looking at is more of monitoring and how to efficiently use water more from a sustainability standpoint. And then after it's being used, how can they harness it to really help have a more kind of closed loop effort to really meet their farming needs.
Yeah. It's interesting you mentioned that, the monitoring of some of these things, and things like fresh water and others. I was recently up another Ohio X members, Cleveland Metro Parks, and they hosted a group of us out for, kind of a tour of what they're up to, and all the different technology. And one, I was quite blown away, because you hear Cleveland Metro Parks is, the organization name, and you think it might be a handful of parks or something, but it's the parks, it's the zoo, it's restaurants. They have their own police force. It's a bunch of golf courses. So it has a huge footprint. I think it's across like maybe 6 counties, but don't quote me on that one. But it's really quite large. And they were talking about so much of the sensor technology that they're trying to utilize, drone technology, so they can fly over and monitor different parks. Because one example, in a real world application, they have, and I'm sure they still have, but they're starting to use more sensor technology to help with it, is volunteers literally showing up on trails and doing a look at what the trail looks like for mountain biking or walking, and how muddy is it after a rain, or how dry is it. And you think about just the infrastructure you have to have of volunteers, that they show up and coordinating it and getting that data. Whereas deploying some of these technologies, it can be instantaneous, and you don't have to wait for that human to go out, drive out, do it, collect it, report it in, get uploaded, and then check the website if you're considering, going out for a hike. And so it's just interesting as you're talking about some of these to, kind of have seen this play out in a couple areas, and the metro parks have such a water, focus with different, again, rivers and lakefront type things. And it's just it's really fascinating, some of these things that touch us on a day-to-day basis, but we don't necessarily think of the technology behind it. It's just we assume that it's going to be done, and when we show up and we hear about a trail report, it's all fine and okay. So it's just interesting to kind of hear you bringing some of this tech transfer conversation into some of the real world applications I got to see not too long ago.
Yeah, yeah, Chris, and you bring up a good point. One of the things, is the whole ecosystem here that's doing tech development.
Hmm.
One, I'll give a shout out to one of the organizations that we collaborate with, is the Cleveland Water Alliance, and they're doing a lot of work. Brian Stubbs, who leads that organization, and his team is doing a lot of work here within Ohio, but also in the Midwest region, to look at deployment of water related technologies. They've actually received some funding, and they're part of a collaborative group here in the Midwest region that received National Science Foundation funding to look at how can they really test technologies, and a lot of the origins have come from some of our federal labs or
Mm.
academic institutions, and how can those related technologies really help and help keep our water supply clean and sustainable here in the Midwest region. And so there's a big effort going on, him and his team, and then they're working with collaborators in most of our bordering states here in the Midwest to look at sensing
Mm.
of water supplies, but they're also looking at filtration is a whole nother area as far as filtering water supplies, and a few other potential uses. But that's an effort that, we look at to potentially partner with. We don't always want to be the player that's coming up with ideas, but
Sure.
there are other peer organizations who are in other sectors that we can collaborate with. And so that's what we try to do also as part of this effort.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm glad you mentioned that, because I think of, I know in Northwestern Ohio, you talk about agriculture and things like runoff. There's been some challenges with the algae, and that has such a literal downstream effect where, that goes into the farming supply of water and just kind of the runoff in Northwestern Ohio. But you talk about things like Intel, and one of the reasons that companies like that are choosing to do business here, invest billions of dollars, is, to your point, because one of the reasons is freshwater access. And data centers, the Googles, the Metas, the AWSs, that's another big one. That fresh water and is hugely important for their work and where they choose to do business. And then also, as we start to see data centers kind of in different clusters, certainly Central Ohio is a strong cluster, but the first one going up to Northwestern Ohio and Bowling Green and Meta, and their $800 million AI powered data center. A lot of reasons that they're choosing to go there and to invest a lot of money in Ohio, or I should say in Northwestern Ohio. But one of which I would have to presume strongly is Bowling Green, and the Northwestern Ohio area is very darn close to fresh water. And so it's just this kind of intersection of deep technology and even data centers with agriculture, and some of this freshwater work that you're talking about is really quite fascinating. But Anthony, anything else on kind of this topic, the initiative, that maybe you want to get across and make sure that you share on this before we kind of get to the second part of our conversation?
No, we talked a lot. I mean, I guess the last piece is kind of, we mentioned kind of sustainability with
Hmm.
respect to kind of the environment here and our water supply, which is important as far
Yep.
as in our state, important to agriculture here. But the other piece is, and for folks, I kind of want to plant the seed along the lines, technology development plays a key as well. But the last piece is really having adequate water supply. And it leads to, direct use as far as where farmers are looking at having a direct, an adequate supply, but also as far as our energy needs,
Mhm.
it plays a big role. So those data centers use a lot of power. Myself, having been an engineer in the power industry, know that you use a lot of water too
Yep.
to cool the equipment, besides just at the data center, but those energy players. And so it's important to have an adequate water supply as well. And so just want to emphasize that message when folks are thinking about it, and maybe sometimes taking it for granted, how important the role plays as far as from a water supply standpoint.
Absolutely. And hopefully, through the efforts of yourself and your team and others like the Water Alliance and others, it'd be great to see the continued investment and more entrepreneurs going into this space where they're working with university partners on the research side to test out these technologies and consider these as real commercial opportunities. Just again, sensing where the world is going and how Ohio is positioned. It seems like this is only an area that will increasingly become more important, and also increasingly in Ohio uniquely opportunity that really opens up hopefully some potential for, again, tech transfer and some research and some businesses to come out of it, and job creation and workforce development. So,
Yes.
it's a fascinating space that you're in, Anthony, for
Yes.
certain.
Yes.
So as we kind of transition to the final part of our show, we like to ask all of our guests a series of fun rapid fire questions. We like to say, the answers don't have to be quick, and we just like to see the different perspectives of someone in Cleveland or people in Columbus or people in Dayton or Toledo or Cincinnati. But the first one is, what's a challenge that you're currently working to solve? It could be something big, it could be something small, it could be something on the personal side, like a book reading challenge that you're in. But just what's a challenge that you're currently working to solve?
Yeah, I would say for us, really, right now, main challenge is this effort, this precision urban agricultural effort. And, for us, is really trying to figure out how can we be that bridge to help more players who are on the supply side developing technologies
Hmm.
work with potential partners on the demand side. That's farmers and those who are in that area. And like I said, we really want to see a result as far as matchmaking from technologies to being implemented at farms. But the other piece is also helping, farmers find opportunities to retain and grow jobs through those opportunities. And then the last piece is really trying, we talked about this a lot. We spoke a lot with respect to water, but that infrastructure piece,
Yeah.
how does water play a role? But also, there's a whole supply chain. And so for those farmers, it's getting their products to consumers.
Hmm.
And how can we help? How can technology play a role? Another example, lastly, would be really how can they, when they're actually looking at planning and looking at production, how can they use products and maybe technology to be a little more advanced
Hmm.
in their thinking, or help them think a little bit more faster to produce results. And so it really comes down to those three areas: the technology, the infrastructure, and then, working with talent. And we want to be that bridge to kind of help on those two sides, really bring them together.
Okay. Well, that sounds great. And the second one for us is, what's a favorite read, listen, or watch? So it could be a book, a podcast, or a show. Again, it can be something business and work related, or it could be something, fun that you use to clock off at the end of the night and, get a little away from some of this type of day to day stuff. So it's a favorite book, podcast, or show for you.
Yeah, and I'm probably a little bit different. I mean, the market is so dynamic. I'm probably more of a periodic,
Hmm.
magazine
Okay.
reader. So Entrepreneur and Inc. magazine are kind of my go-tos,
Okay.
just to kind of stay aware of what's happening from an entrepreneurial perspective, innovation and business perspective. And then kind of, if I really want to see, kind of more in the from a TV standpoint. Occasionally I'm going to watch Shark Tank, although I have to keep things in perspective, having worked with small businesses and
Sure.
entrepreneurs and part of the ecosystem. But that's kind of my go-to for fun,
Nice.
to
I like
watch
it.
that. Yeah.
And I do like the magazine shout out. I am very much a sucker for a good magazine. If anything, it's I can get into trouble of subscribing and then having a stack of like the Economist up to here, and it's like I haven't gotten through any of them because they just keep piling up. But to me, at least, nothing better than like a physical paper or a magazine or something like that. Which I feel like again, it can be rare. Oftentimes, I do that, but you're at the airport or something, it's always nice to pick up something in your hand and get off the tablets or computers a bit.
Right. Right.
So, Anthony, someone's coming to visit, coming up to Cleveland. Where would you take them for a coffee or a meal to kind of show off your part of the state?
Oh, Chris, I mean, there's so many places here to
That's
go
what's fun
to.
about this question.
Um, I'm an East Sider. I was born and raised on the East Side, and I live far East now. I'm a Cleveland kid,
Okay.
so I'll give a shout out kind of to one of the restaurants. I like Wild Mango over in Legacy Village, kind of in the Lyndhurst area in
Uh-huh.
Legacy Village. That's kind of one of my choices. It's more of an Asian fusion type of flair, so presentation, but the food is good there. And then, I'm a Far East Sider now, and so I would say out in, kind of in the winemaking country in Geneva,
Hmm.
Ferrante's winery and restaurant, and
Okay.
so they make a mean ice wine.
Okay.
Out in that area. So kind of coming back to our ag concept,
Sure.
there's a number of players. Ferrante's is one, but Geneva out east is kind of really a cluster of ag activity that we
Hmm.
have in the state, and they make ice wine,
Hmm.
grapes that, hey, at a certain temperature, actually freezes, and once it freezes at that temperature, that it makes an excellent wine. And so, folks who haven't been out into the Geneva area, I give a shout out to them and say, hey, indulge as far as as far as kind of the ice wine, which we have as far as my wife and I. And then secondly, excellent food, Italian restaurant at Ferrante's.
Yeah, love it. And yeah, as someone who's from northeastern Ohio as well. Uh, but one, the summer is incredible. It's less humidity than other parts of the state, and I've lived all over. But there are some really great wineries, and just to your point, like kind of farm style restaurants, and kind of production centers that you don't feel like you're in Ohio. You kind of feel like you're maybe out west in Sonoma or something crazy. It's like, oh, this is, you have to drive, but that's how that works. But so I love that one. And so final question, Anthony, is how are you spending a perfect Saturday? What's it look like for you? One caveat is no work is involved. And so how are you choosing to spend a Saturday?
Well, now it's fall, so it's football season.
Yeah.
So on Saturdays, it's very likely watching some college football here, and maybe for a university here, major university here in the central part of the state,
Yeah.
but college football in general. But also for me, it's I'm out, and so really spending time in outdoors. Try to do a little farming
Okay.
myself,
Okay.
nothing in comparison to the farmers there, so it's kind of combination of farming, and then also I've grown up here living near the lake. I like to fish as well.
Okay.
So those are the activities for me.
Yeah, being outdoors again. No better place to do it than Ohio and northeastern Ohio in particular for you. So, Anthony, this has been great. I've really enjoyed the conversation. Anything that you want to leave listeners, watchers with, and what we'll do is put information on Parallax and OAI in the show notes, as well as your LinkedIn. So if people want to follow along, but anything you want to leave folks with is a final call.
Yeah, I'll just say for the Precision Urban Agricultural Initiative, really, Parallax is really kind of taking advantage of our role as, I would say, in this case, really kind of being that bridge between the supply side, the technology developers, and then really helping bring solutions to farmers who are looking for efficiency or to resolve problems that they have. And so for us, currently right now where we're at, we're looking to sustain our current initiative beyond the current funding cycle, which is going to end sometime this fall, maybe a little later as far as
Mhm.
towards the end of the year. And so we're reaching out and researching and looking for potential funding opportunities to support us for this effort, and also looking for partnerships to engage with as well, because they may have funding where they can sustain some of the efforts, or interested in setting up some pilot partnerships here.
Sure.
The other piece is, lastly, we're really looking to scale this effort. We started off here in Northeast Ohio, kind of being that bridge and looking to match make as far as technology solutions, technology development that can meet the needs of farmers. And so we're looking to scale beyond just Northeast Ohio, maybe across the state, or maybe from a regional perspective.
Hmm.
And so we want to bring growers, technologies, and funders together to help engage along those lines.
That's great.
We're working with a national organization called Landworks. They do a lot of work as far as from a technology development standpoint. And so we've also are engaging with them as far as the partnership piece, and then looking at how we could potentially maybe have an outreach event here to showcase some of the applications here to bring farmers as well as technology developers together later this year as well as part of this initiative. So a lot of work is going on. So check out our website as far as at oai.org or parallaxresearch.org to learn more about the initiative as well.
All right. Well, Anthony, thank you so much. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for sharing some of your work. Thanks for these initiatives that you're out there leading on. Certainly important areas for our state. Appreciate everyone for listening and watching. So another episode of Built in Ohio. We very much appreciate it. I hope you all enjoyed this conversation as much as I did, and we'll talk to you all soon. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.